Okay, guys.
Something special happens during study abroad. It's as if I get to see my students' life change right in front of my eyes.
Taking this opportunity to go to Italy and experience a new culture.
It really reinvents you, and that experience is priceless.
To study abroad and travel and get to experience something that's not the United States.
Instead of learning about these areas through a book or through a computer screen, we were actually there.
You're not the same when you come back.
The whole study abroad trip and going to Italy and visiting a new country.
It's kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
It gives substance to the education that I'm getting.
As we talk about global economy, we can't really prepare our students if they don't leave their own backyard, their own university, their hometown, their state, their country.
Go out into the city, go out into the streets, meet people.
Breathe the air, experience the art.
Explore, experience the food, experience the cuisine.
Seeing the monuments themselves, learning about them through local tour guide.
To be able to see that in person and take your own pictures and see that yourself, it's just an amazing experience.
You have to make something like this happen.
It really was just one experience that I'm so grateful that I made the leap to take.
We wanted students to have another learning experience on site other than just in a museum by interacting with the local people.
When I think of Venice, I think of adventure.
I really loved Venice. It was our first stop.
The first thing that I noticed about Venice were all the pigeons.
Water everywhere, like the bridges and the canals, and just getting lost in all of these little streets. Going to Venice and taking the boat ride over, it was very exciting to actually step off the boat and to just be a part of it as soon as you stepped your first foot onto land.
Taking a boat ride over to a floating city, and we came around this corner, and there's the city. And I was looking at it, and I'm like, holy cow. There it is.
One of the first things the students got to do was to get in a gondola, sort of get away from the mobs of tourists and get down these quiet little streets where you can sort of have a glimpse of what life in Venice must be like.
Being there, we kind of just inserted ourselves into their lives, their everyday lives.
It's odd because, at the end of the day, we all wake up and we go to work and we do things that we need to, and we eat and we sleep and everything else, but the way that they live their life is just so different in some aspects.
I'm on the gondola ride and there's, laundry that's hung out over one of the canals, or a cat sleeping on a balcony, or a flower box.
We kind of got to see how simply they live. So in the midst of all this history and all this opulence in the city, that there's just people simply living their lives the way they always have, and it's different than what we've experienced.
To live in this city that has so much history and culture, and they have thousands of years of history, which I think really impacts their day-to-day life.
When I think of Venice, I think of history.
In the 16th century, they said that the gondolas had gotten so outrageous with the ornamentation and sort of competition to outdo one another with their gondolas, that's why the laws were created to sort of make this very strict, sleek gondola. Very quickly, what the gondola does is sort of transport you out of sort of the madness that can sometimes be St. Mark's and get to sort of the quiet of Venice.
The thing that stood out to me the most was the architecture of the Doge's palace. The fact that it was a Venetian style Gothic, which was not as vertical and also incorporated Byzantine architecture. And that was also the result of their seafaring trade and the fact that they were on the water. So their architecture is actually a little bit different than the rest of Italy at the time.
When I think of Venice, I think of the art of glass.
Spectacular glass, the world-class glass blowing and artwork that goes on in Venice is just amazing. You look at the street lamps, and the glass, the rose-colored glass in the street lamps is even Murano glass. We were able to take the students to a glass-blowing demonstration where you truly see the beginnings just with sort of simple sand and heat and the extraordinary talent of this individual with his own breath, spin and blow and turn this into just sort of magic right before our eyes. Just incredibly extraordinary. The respect and support for the arts in Venice really contributes to just this amazing city that it is today. To be in Venice, where they have beautifully incorporated this magnificent art into the glasses that you dine with, the street lights, it really was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
When I think of Florence, I think of artwork and education.
As an English major, I think of the Renaissance and rebirth.
Art and history.
Being able to see all of this art and, things that I've learned about for years, amazing.
This idea of education being embodied in a city is alive in Florence, and as a professor, that's just a great place to be.
It's no wonder you have great people like Michelangelo, great people like Petrarch and Ficino, and people who studied in the Platonic Academy, who then took those ideas, which were very radical at the time, because since the Middle Ages, most of the art had been religious art. So for the Medicis to bring back the nude statues and to bring back mythology into paintings like Botticelli's La Primavera or The Birth of Venus, this was something very, very special.
So when we were walking around, we saw La Primavera and The Birth of Venus, and I'd learned about that in my humanities class, but seeing it in person was completely different. And it was nice to be able to have the professors with me because they were able to give me more background about it.
There's art everywhere from like the sculptures to the architecture of the buildings, the churches.
I'm reminded about the power that education can have over a society and ultimately over an entire continent, as what happened in Florence really started the Renaissance and brought back the continent of Europe out of the Dark Ages.
When I think of Rome, I think of the Italian culture and everything that Italy stands for.
Architecture and complexity.
Architecture.
The Colosseum and the Pantheon, two of the oldest things. The Romans were the first to do the ellipse, to add basically two theaters together.
Huge chances, bread and surfaces. Skeleton of this building was raised using travertine stone blocks, and they were put together more or less like Lego blocks, basically a technique we call nowadays rebars. So using iron bars in between the blocks to keep them together, and then thanks to some grooves carved on the surface, they could pour molten lead into the structure to fill the gap in between the iron bars and the marble, fill them and solder the blocks, the structures together.
Rome is bold and brash and unapologetic. It is history on every corner. It's almost sensory overload. There's just so much to take in.
It was a little overwhelming at times, but it was amazing.
Well, next we go to the Roman Forum. Basically, we get inside the area of the ancient Roman Forum, which used to be the civic center of Rome. For like 1200 years, the Forum was the social, political, religious and economic center of Rome. And there they built the most important temples, public buildings, the civic square, courts of law, and public offices, basically, so the administration of Rome.
I've spent essentially my adult life studying this art and craft of communications, and to be in a location that is so incredibly important to the field is just sort of magical.
It was kind of interesting to see how they had kind of incorporated modern day life into a city that's so old and so ancient.
Walking into St. Peter's Basilica, it really took my breath away because it wasn't only Bernini's piece in there, it was also Michelangelo's. So from seeing Michelangelo's Pieta to the right of me, I was taken away because Michelangelo sculpted that himself as a young artist, and also in the same building was Bernini's bronze sculpture. And it was enormous, and it really was the most breathtaking for me. Assisi was really charming to me.
It was very real. There were so many Italians traveling to the Basilica the same day we were.
You felt like you were in a real town, and you felt like you were kind of experiencing life as an Italian.
When I think of Assisi, I think of the simple life.
When I think of Assisi, I think of religious history.
St. Francis really focused on simplicity.
He is the patron saint for Italy.
I really thought that St. Francis's emphasis on staying away from worldly pleasures was seen in Assisi because it was smaller and it seemed very humble.
His teachings are really gospel values, less about proclaiming that you're a Christian with your words, but more with the way you live your life and your deeds.
And it really had a big focus on St. Francis's Basilica, and that it still stands today.
The city of Assisi is very important to Italian Catholics. And second to the Vatican, it's considered the most important holy site.
Seeing the actual frescoes on the ceiling that they had painted themselves was really breathtaking to know how much work had gone into that, and that each fresco told a different story.
When I remember Assisi, I remember the singing monks. It was so amazing walking through, and we heard the monks in the background singing, and that was just, it was really overwhelming. I actually ended up taking the tour guide's earbuds out just so that I could listen to that and kind of take in that experience, and it really kind of set in that this is such a devout religion that people are so invested in, to the point to where people from all over the world travel of this faith and of people who aren't of the Catholic faith to just lay eyes upon and hear this music and see this building and see the influence that it's had over the centuries. It's really amazing.
It was definitely a humbling experience to go from such big cities to a smaller one that still had such a great emphasis on how important tourism was, and also enjoying the smaller things and enjoying your religion and enjoying everyday life.
When I think of Pompeii, I think of rebirth.
Ruins.
Preservation.
The visit of Pompeii is like a journey back in time, 2,000 years back. It's the best preserved Roman town, where you can see how Romans lived 2,000 years ago. A fascinating experience. You can enter in the houses of the Romans, in the public buildings, walk on roads, and understand the life of 2,000 years ago.
Walking through the streets of Pompeii, I remember the sun was beating down on me, and I was walking through these cobblestone streets, and I really tried to take a step back and think about what it would be like thousands of years ago to actually walk through these streets.
There was always something new to see. There was ruins upon ruins everywhere. And we would turn the corner and there'd be broken pillars, there would be pieces of stone. You can just see like the civilization, the remnants of the civilization. It's just kind of impactful to see all of that.
Because of the body casting process in Pompeii, we're actually able to see casts of residents of that place in ancient times, and getting to see the size of them and all of that was absolutely stunning.
What Pompeii really provides is a snapshot into what life looked like at that time. When you are in Pompeii, you get to see society sort of frozen in time. And as tragic as the story of Pompeii and the history of Pompeii is, it is an incredible gift, because the preservation that went on because of the great tragedy of Mount Vesuvius is amazing.
It really was just so heartbreaking to know that Mount Vesuvius wiped away a whole entire city of people in one day.
It's very humbling because it reminds you how quickly things can change.
I think the most terrifying thing was the way that they were preserved and how they caught the body in the position that it died in, and I thought that was just so interesting.
You know, you can't look at the cast of the dog, or you can't look at the cast of the small child and not feel something terribly disturbing. Despite all of the tragedy and the natural elements that rain down on Pompeii, to have these structures still standing, to have mosaic inlaid tiles and artwork that stands the test of time is really a powerful lesson.
We were standing in a sauna and really thinking how innovative they were to create a sauna thousands of years ago and to establish a gym, and that exercise was important, and that they had small businesses, they had houses, and it really was amazing to see that people actually created a community here.
You can see the engineering, the fountains, the water pipes, the main square. It's really, everything is a surprise. Every step you make, every building you go, every place you go is a new surprise in Pompeii.
It was such a great experience. We still walk through it today, even though no one's living there. Being able to walk through and learn about it has really changed me personally.
The lesson in La Dolce Vita that I carry with me is to live life simply.
It's so easy to get carried away in all of the complexities that life brings.
I really view the country of Italy as so special and rare.
Life is for living. Life is to be savored and enjoyed and shared with those that you love most.
It's nice to just take a break and sit in Starbucks with some friends, people watch, and just drink your cappuccino like you would as if you're sitting in a little cafe in Venice.
You take back so much more than you think you do from studying abroad and experiencing another culture in another country.
Live like the Italians do, because they're very open and like in the moment at all times. Everywhere you go, everybody's smiling and happy and living their life.
It's a really great experience, especially in your college years when you're more aware of the world around you and much more educated about the things that you're going to see.
At JU, we like to provide that opportunity to give them a world experience, to see diversity in the world, the diversity in culture, to see diversity in peoples. And it also broadens your perspective if you have this, cultural and enlightening experience to share.
It's just nice to be able to stop and slow down your fast-paced life and kind of enjoy what life it really is.
My lesson in La Dolce Vita really reminds me that life can be absolutely beautiful. Okay, well, what was I going to say?
Oh, it happened again. I'm full of pizza. I'm full of pizza.
You just have to remind yourself, like, oh my gosh, this is the real Venice, not, fake Venice that everywhere else. This way? Hey, okay. Hello, okay.
I feel like I sounded like Dr. Willette. I'm sorry, that was funny.
Be absolutely beautiful. Finally!